The Colts are riding high with a 3-game win streak, and dare we start talking playoffs? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, what up? Thanks for tuning in and making us your first post-game listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. What is up, friends and family? This is Jake Arthur and Zack Hicks. You know, the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. And we are here today celebrating another Colts victory. That's 3 in a row on the heels of a 3-game losing streak at a time when playoffs seem like, you know, we're talking playoffs. That's how it was. They're now 6-5. By the end of the early game window, they were the final spot in the AFC playoffs. Now, that could change from the results of a couple other games, but they have done their job, everybody. So we're here to talk about, you know, the highs, the lows, offense, defense. What did we like? What did we not like? But Zach, shoot, man, 3-game win streak. How are you feeling?
Pretty good, man. I mean, pretty good. Like, look, I know people are going to say, okay, you only beat the Panthers, the Patriots, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, those are not great football teams. So I totally understand when people are going to say that. But look, when it comes to the NFL, parity is king. Like, there's a lot of parity in the NFL. Yes, there's obviously a big gap between a team like the Colts even and the Panthers and the Patriots, but you still need to win those games. I mean, one of the teams they're competing with for a playoff spot that's in their division, Houston Texans, lost to the Panthers, right? I believe that's the Panthers' one victory this season was against the Houston Texans. So it's not like a thing where, you know, you're playing these like FCS teams like in college football or anything like that. You're still playing NFL caliber teams, albeit just weaker NFL teams. So you have to get the job done. You have to take care of business, and the Colts have taken care of business the last couple of weeks. This was definitely against a better team than what we saw the last 2 weeks. I mean, obviously the Buccaneers are competing for that division there in the NFC South. They're a competitive team. They're not a great team, but they're a competitive team. But the Colts were able to get the job done. It was a close game, but the Colts were able to come ahead at the end of this one, and they did what they needed to do to get this 3-game win streak.
Yeah, I think what I am most pleased with this one is this wasn't a big but win. Like, I feel like all 3 phases kind of came to play on this one. They all did some really good things. Offensively, they bucked their latest trend. You know, for the last couple games, they've only rushed for 148 yards total in the last 2 games. They had over 150 in this one alone. So the run game got back on track. Gardner Minshew didn't necessarily have the game he probably could have against such a weak passing defense, but he did just enough. You know, he was able to find Michael Pittman Jr. time and time again. There were some good things in the pass game. But yeah, the defense I thought was really good. 6 sacks against a quarterback who he's got a gunslinger mentality. He's got a strong arm. Like, I like that they were able to disrupt Baker Mayfield so much. They got a couple takeaways. The defensive front didn't do so great against the run, but you got to love what they did as pass rushers.
Yeah, you know, this run defense is still a major issue without Grover Stewart. I mean, we're especially seeing it on the non-DeForest Buckner snaps with this defensive front because it's Eric Johnson out there, it's Adetomiwa Adebawore out there, it's Taven Bryan. These are just not run defending defensive tackles. Adetomiwa Adebawore is at least a young guy who can rush the passer a little bit. I don't know what the other 2 are really bringing the Colts at this point, but not to keep everything negative here. I think the Colts defense, though, is doing a good job of just keeping everything in front of them. You know, they're not allowing too many big plays. Like, yes, there were a couple big runs in this game. Mike Evans got loose for a couple of pretty big plays in the passing game, but for the most part, the Colts are doing a really good job of sitting back in their quarters coverage. They're keeping everything in front. They're getting those timely turnovers and sacks when they need them, and as a result, this defense that looked like it was on its last legs, it looked like it was the end of the road against New Orleans Saints because it was that bad against the Saints, they've really turned it around these last 3 games, and they're still doing it again without Juju Brents playing, without Grover Stewart playing, after just releasing Shaquille Leonard. Like, this defense has gone through a lot of turnover and losing a lot of day one starters or early season starters, and they're starting to find their rhythm a little bit and doing a lot of really good things back there. So yeah, I think this Colts defense is mainly the main reason why the Colts won this game. They had a really strong game overall. They stood tall in the red zone a couple times, and as a result, again, the Colts are currently in the playoff race. They're right there in that 7 seed.
Yeah, the secondary wasn't terrific, but given the fact that they're facing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin with a quarterback who's pretty capable in Baker Mayfield, I was overall pleased. I was kind of waiting for this matchup because having big check marks against the Patriots and Panthers, who are like 2 of the worst passing offenses, that's one thing, but you had to come out and prove it in this one and give them about a C. Like it was fine. You can't really kill them for that. It could have been much worse against someone like Mike Evans. But let's look at Gardner Minshew. This we know what this guy is at this point. Early in games, pretty solid. When things are scripted, you have your first 15. It's quick. He's spreading it around. Like, there seems to be a plan. In the middle of the game, it's a little rough. Seeing ghosts, peripheral vision, awareness scores of 0. But then late in the game, made enough plays ultimately for the Colts offense to pull it out.
Yeah, I was at least happy to see those first 15 or so plays from him because it at least looked operational again. Like, again, this Colts offense wasn't doing anything perfect early in the game, but the team was able to move the ball. They were efficient. I mean, I think I saw for the most part of this game, they were 82% success rate, which means that they're getting those positive yards. They're getting first downs. They're moving the ball effectively. Really, the only thing that slowed down their offense in this game whatsoever was their third down offense. They just struggled on third downs when Minshew had to make those plays. He just couldn't get it done. But for the most part, again, if this is your backup quarterback playing, I'm fine with a game like this outside of those couple turnover-worthy plays there in the middle of the game. As long as the offense is kept operational, you're staying ahead of schedule, you're moving the ball efficiently, you're having high success rate, I'm fine with that. Just don't have the turnovers and we're good. So don't have the fumbles from behind, don't have the crazy miscommunication picks, or I don't know what he was doing on that near interception to Antoine Winfield, or I really have no clue what went into that decision there. Yeah. But aside from those, I think he mostly had a really solid game. He still has the pocket awareness issues. He still has the issues on third downs. But again, we still have to kind of grade this on a curve because this is a backup level quarterback. You're going to get backup level play from him. And if this is the backup level play they're getting, you can win with this. You really can't win, really. I mean, I know they won the last 2 games with what he did, but you really can't against better teams. And this type of game, you can win with this type of quarterback play against real NFL teams, or better NFL teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, for sure. And then we would obviously be remiss to not finish out the opening of our show without talking about Samson Ebukam. 2 sacks, forced fumble, strip sack at the end of the game. He called game. Really, really solid performance from him. He had a good start to the season, had some sacks, but he was getting them against backups. He was basically getting them against guys that teams had to go and ask a bodyguard from a nightclub to come play tackle for him. And he was getting those. He had a great game against Tristan Wirfs, who is an all-world player. Yeah. And as I know you're going to mention it, he did it in kind of a variety of ways.
Yeah, and the thing too with Samson Ebukam is, again, I know the sacks haven't been there in recent weeks, but he's still getting pressure, still doing what he was doing early in the season. It's just he wasn't finishing those plays for sacks. Now, we saw in this game, the first sack, a little bit of luck involved. Baker Mayfield falls down after getting touched by Ebukam, but that last sack against Tristan Wirfs, of all players, Tristan Wirfs, an all-world left tackle, fantastic player. Samson Ebukam just took him to school and beat him with that cross chop. Fantastic rush. He finished the play. He forced the fumble, and the Colts got the win. That's what you want to see out of your veteran pass rusher who's been having a really strong season. You want to see that closing ability. I thought it was going to be DeForest Buckner that closed the game out, but Samson Ebukam, against one of the best left tackles in football, was able to close this one out. Just a fantastic play, and he deserves all the props in the world for being that big closer for the Colts today.
Yeah, he was the leader of a really solid pass rushing performance from the defensive front today. And if you haven't already, I actually caught up with Ebukam in the locker room after the game. Got a quick video of that as well. So check that out after this. And coming up soon, we're going to talk about the rest of the offense because there were still some positives. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. And hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats right now, and they might not have the time or resources to actually do the hiring. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker and easier. And that's what it's all about. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
And guys, this show is also sponsored by BetterHelp. This time of year can be a lot. Hey, I work in retail. I've worked in retail for the last 7 years. We just got through Black Friday. I know this time of year can be a lot. It was a lot for me this week. That's why Jake was covering for me quite a bit on the show. But it's natural to feel some sadness and some anxiety about this time of year. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amidst all the stress and the change, something to look forward to make you just feel grounded and to give you the tools to manage everything that's going on. So if you guys are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, guys, so we're diving into this Colts offense. And look, we already talked about Gardner Minshew. I don't want to keep going into the whole Gardner Minshew conversation because really the Colts in this game relied on their 2 star players on offense. The 2 star players that they got in the same draft class, Michael Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor. Those were the guys that carried the load for the Colts. And look, if the Colts are going to make the playoffs, those are the 2 offensive players that they're going to have to lean on a lot the rest of the way. Now, they leaned on Michael Pittman Jr. in the first half, and he came up really big in the first half, had 10 catches on the day for 107 yards. But then in the second half, when they had to run this game away and they had to put the game just in the bag, Jonathan Taylor carried them to victory with 15 carries for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jake, what do you think about this great offensive game plan of just, hey, get the ball to your star players?
Yeah, it seems pretty seamless, right? Pass to score and run to win. I think we're starting to understand what that means by this point. But no, it was I felt like they didn't abandon any one successful thing throughout the game. Like I felt like they did a good job balancing everything. And I don't know if you guys listened to Chris Ballard's his appearance on the Colts podcast during the bye week. But he said that Jonathan Taylor being so heavily involved without Zack Moss was kind of an anomaly against the Patriots, and they wanted to get Moss more involved, and they did. This is exactly what I think they want to see: a performance with Taylor getting a little more, but in total, 150 rushing yards from the pair. Michael Pittman Jr. again, like you mentioned, stud performance. He had one drop that he would really want back, but that has been just a blip compared to what he's done this season. He's on pace for a huge year. One that's going to put him up there, in Colts lore with like the T.Y. Hilton performances and things like that. So really big deal for him. I wrote after the game, I don't care what side you fall on, whether or not he's a true number one receiver. It doesn't matter. He's clearly the best receiver for the Colts, and they need him.
Yeah. I think at worst he's going to be a franchise tag player for the Colts this offseason, but I'd be so shocked if they don't get a deal done with him by the end of the year or at least early into the offseason. Like he's not touching free agency, guys. He's going to be a Colt for a long time. I think he wants to be a Colt for a long time, and I don't think there's any fear of losing him. But those are the 2 players the Colts need to rely on down the stretch. But they also have a couple other players that they relied on in this game too. Zack Moss, 8 carries for 55 yards, 2 catches for 15 yards. I loved this usage of Zack Moss. I was complaining quite a bit after that Patriots game about how Moss was completely out of the game plan because, look, if Moss is going to just be your third down back or your passing down back, even if that's all his role is going to be, you can still run out of those looks. You can sit back in those shotgun looks with lighter boxes and give the ball to Zach Moss, who is a fantastic contact balance type running back who can get those really hard-earned yards up the middle. You can use him in that way. And that's what we saw with the Colts. He had a ton of snaps in the first half because the Colts were going so pass heavy. And as a result, he had a couple runs up the middle against really light boxes where he was able to churn out some really big gains. And then when it got to the second half and the Colts wanted to really pack it in and just run the ball, that's when Jonathan Taylor, the closer, came out and was able to put this game in the bag. But Zach Moss, 8 carries for 55 yards, 2 catches for 15 yards. I really love the usage from him today. And again, like you said, Chris Ballard wants to get more Zach Moss involved. I also want Zach Moss more involved because I think he's just too good of a player for your offense to keep on the bench, no matter what you're paying Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And then we saw some shorter stuff. We've seen a continuation of the Colts getting Alec Pierce more involved, or getting him involved in more than just the shot plays, really. We're seeing him on a lot more slants, just a lot more stuff over the middle, because he can create that separation, and you just get him the ball inside. He can shield his body away from the defender, pick up a little bit of yardage. Again, he doesn't have to be this big play guy all the time. He's capable of more. And 4 catches for 27 yards. I mean, that is sometimes a Michael Pittman stat line when they're just trying to feed him all this little yak stuff. Like, Pierce usually averages like 15 yards a catch. So this is proof that, they can find ways to get him better involved. And I like the evolution of it. And Josh Downs, again, had a couple uncharacteristic plays, normally very sure-handed, but still 5 catches for 43 yards. His first catch was just so like the whole play was just so natural and brilliant, how he caught it and then pivoted away from the defender to pick up the extra yardage. Like, that guy just has a feel for the football field.
Yeah, one thing I want to say about Alec Pierce before we talk about the play on offense in this game, we have to talk about the play before we close out the offense segment. But one thing I want to say about Alec Pierce is, look, there's no downfield element to this Colts team this year because they just don't have the quarterback for it. They don't have the quarterback that can throw the ball down the field or who is willing to throw the ball down the field. So Alec Pierce these last couple of weeks has really had to transition from being Alec Pierce to being Zach Pascal. That's kind of who he's had to be these last couple of weeks. He's had to go from being the downfield guy to being the fantastic blocker who can occasionally get some catches. And I'm not saying that's a great development for your second-year wide receiver, but you know what? For a guy who all of his targets were taken away from him because he lost the highly explosive downfield throwing quarterback that is Anthony Richardson, he lost that vital element to his game. To just change your game around completely and become this Zach Pascal type where you're a fantastic blocker and a guy who can catch underneath, like, I respect it. Hopefully next year with Richardson back, he can get back to being Alec Pierce again, but I do respect that change. But Jake, before we get out of this segment here, we have to talk about the play call. 4th and inches on the wrong side of the 50. Shane Steichen goes for it. I was super happy he decided to go for it, but when I saw Zaire Franklin coming on the field, I saw all the big bodies coming on the field. I was like, okay, cool. We're just going to meet power with power, run up the middle, see what we can do. But then they whipped out this fantastic play action play with a seam shot to Mo Alley-Cox, where if Mo Alley-Cox ran a little bit faster than me out there, he probably scores. But, regardless, whatever it is, 30-yard gain on the play. The Colts were able to score a touchdown a couple plays later, which kind of put this game away. Just a fantastic – I mean, the balls to call that play, though. I mean,
yeah.
That takes so much. That takes so much guts just to say, you know what? We're gonna put the ball in the hands of Gardner Minshew with the game
and
that
Mo
he's
Alley-Cox.
having, and Mo Alley-Cox with his unsure hands at times. But he had a play that he trusted. He gave credit to Tom Manning after the game as well for that play call. But oh my gosh, what a play call to put this game away and really give the Colts the victory late in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was, and after the game, Mo said it felt like the ball was in the air for a million years.
Well, it's Minshew, of course it was. Of course it was.
Yeah, for sure. But again, if Mo is wide open, you never know if it's going to be a catch or not. So again, the balls to call that was awesome. But no, Shane can get a little cute sometimes, especially trying to draw defenses offside and things like that. I had a feeling about that when I was watching it all bunched up, and I was like, there's something different about this. And so I kind of expanded my view, and I was like, oh, the tight end is leaking out. There it is. Seam shot. So no, that was beautiful. That was a Shane is in his bag moment. So
it was.
You got to love it. It's a guy who is getting more and more comfortable with what he can call. I mean, he's been a play caller before, but balancing it with being the head coach and making certain decisions during situational football and key situations, you'll love to see it.
Yeah, just a fantastic, fantastic play. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk about this Colts defense and how, yes, there were some ugly moments, but for the most part, the Colts defense won the day for Indianapolis against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Guys, PrizePicks is the most fun that I have had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less than their projected stats, and you're on your way. With the basketball season here as well, I know there's a lot of people who cross-pollinate with sports. Zack is one of them. PrizePicks is probably the coolest and best place to mix your 2 sports desires, basically. So they have a specials league. It's a league created specifically for combo projections. You can combine, prop bets and more and less thans for basketball and football players. Take, for example, you want Tyrese Halliburton from the Pacers and Michael Pittman from the Colts, and you say that they're going to combine for more or less than 10.5 3-pointers and catches made. Number one, this would have been an awesome game for you. But number 2, that's just like a really cool concept, and it brings something fresh to the betting scene. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy for people who think life and sports is unfair, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, both, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and they don't return in the second, then that player gets rebooted for you. PrizePicks is the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy because, again, life isn't fair. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Defense. There were some highs and lows in this one, but overall, I came away feeling pretty good about it. There was a feel-good story. Obviously, we haven't dove into it a ton because it just is what it is this week. We have talked about it and did an episode on it, but obviously Shaquille Leonard was waived by the Colts on Tuesday, which opens the door for EJ Speed to be a 100% player essentially alongside Zaire Franklin. But Ronnie Harrison was promoted from the practice squad, converted to linebacker from safety this week, and was the starting Sam. And in his first action for the Colts, picks off Baker Mayfield, jumping in front of Mike Evans. So really great feel-good story for that. What did you see from Ronnie Harrison, and what are you hoping for moving forward?
I was mostly just really intrigued that that's the way they went with their base defensive personnel in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I really was thinking that the base defense personnel would be Zaire Franklin at the mic, which that remained the same. I expected that to stay the same. But I thought EJ Speed would switch over to the Will backer, and then they would have like a Grant Stewart in there at Sam linebacker. I thought that was the easy way to go. It made the most sense. But instead, they kind of went with EJ Speed as the base Sam or Otto, however Gus Bradley labels that in his playbook. And they put Ronnie Harrison at weak side linebacker. And you guys know me, whenever I talk about Madden, I always put linebackers I put safeties at linebacker. I've done this with Jaquiski Tart over the years. I've done this with a ton of dudes. I love doing this, putting those safeties at linebackers. Back in the day, I fell in love with the Josh Harvey Clemens types of draft Twitter and stuff, those hyper
Jeremy Cash.
linebacker. Jeremy Cash. Yeah, Jeremy Chin, I thought was going to be the greatest one ever. So seeing this actually in play, putting a Ronnie Harrison who was very familiar with the type of defense the Colts have been running the last couple of weeks there at Alabama, running a lot of Saban concepts there, obviously at Alabama, and the Colts have been doing that the last couple of weeks. So getting him there at linebacker and seeing it pay dividends on the interception, it was really great to see. I mean, I was a huge fan of Ronnie Harrison years ago as a draft prospect. He always had the chops to play linebacker, I always thought as well. Again, as someone who always thinks this way when I see a safety, and I always think they can play a little linebacker. But it was a really cool transition. It was really cool to see it pay off so early. And really, really good coverage. I mean, it was just a really great play by him. I do think that pass was probably going to be picked off by like 4 different Colts defenders. I don't really know where Baker Mayfield was going with that pass, but regardless, really great play by Ronnie Harrison. And like you said, a really great story for him to switch to the new position, come in his very first game, maybe his second snap on defense, he gets an interception.
Yeah, it felt fairly obvious just going back to the summer and now what they did this week, they've been itching to get him involved. They just didn't have a role for him yet coming from the practice squad, but they didn't even need to keep him. They had several safeties, around this summer. They didn't even need to keep him. I kind of thought he would be a cut that they didn't want to cut, but they had to. No, right away they got him involved, put him back on the field, and he made a play for him. Again, defensive front, you got a sack from Kwity Paye, kind of a hustle play, sticking with it to the end. Baker Mayfield takes off for a run, and Kwity just cuts him short. Isaiah Land stacking some games together. He went from being a healthy scratch earlier in the season to I have to look at it, but over the last 3-4 weeks, he's probably got 2.5 sacks at least. Yeah. And then Tyquan Lewis has kind of been on it as well. He was right there against the Patriots, did it again, came together, I think, with Dio for a half sack on this one. So these guys are coming at it. And a couple young guys, again, I mentioned Dio, Adatome, really coming for it. I think he's got 1.5 sacks and a tackle for loss in the last 3 games. Not gaudy stats, but he's coming along kind of nicely, I think. Kind of putting some things together, becoming a little more consistent.
Yeah, it's been much better than his run defense. His run defense has not been perfect by any means whatsoever. But I do think in the pass game and as a pass rusher, he's been showing a lot of traits that really made everyone so in love with him as a prospect and so shocked that he fell to the Colts in the 4th round. I think that explosion and that speed is just really uncanny to have for a player of his size. So getting him out there for more pass rushing situations and more stunts and twists up front has been a really, really great development for the Colts. Again, we're going to talk about it here in a second. The run defense is a disaster. It is so bad from a defensive front perspective. And that's not even talking about Ebukam and Kwity Paye. They've both been fantastic against the run. That interior has been so bad. But one positive thing we can say is the last 3 weeks, pretty much every defensive lineman they've thrown out there has been effective to some degree as a pass rusher. Yeah. So that's a really positive development in a passing league. It's one thing if you can't stop the run, sure, it sucks. But as long as you can stop the pass, you're probably going to win games. And we've seen that these last 3 weeks with the Colts, where their secondary is getting a lot more on the same page for the most part. And their pass rush is coming alive with, 6, 7, 8 guys getting after it. So I'm impressed with that development from the Colts defensive line. Yes, I want to see more defensive stops and somebody other than Buckner doing something in the run game, but I'm impressed with the way they've all developed as pass rushers these last couple weeks.
Yeah. I mean, we do have to talk about the run game though, because we only have one more week of there being no Grover. In those first 5 games that he was out, they allowed 154 yards on the ground per game. It was 114 yards on the ground with him. So a big difference. The Buccaneers, it was 125 yards today, I think, which that's not 150, but that was still a season high for the league's worst rushing attack. It was almost 50 yards more than their average. It's 72 yards was their average. So not great, man. Not great. Again, it can't just be DeForest inside that is taking things up. And I didn't think the linebackers had their strongest game today either. I don't know if I know Zaire's had a knee. He's not going to blame it on that or anything, but it just wasn't their sharpest performance. A little uncharacteristic. I don't think it's going to stay a trend because, again, Zaire's been a monster. EJ Speed has been really good against the run throughout his whole career. So this could just be a blip. But, they got Derrick Henry next week, so we'll see.
Look, at the end of the day, if you're sacrificing chunk runs in order to stop the passing game, I'll live with it as long as you stand tall in the red zone. They had 2 miscommunications in the red zone today, or one that was just outside the red zone that led to touchdowns. As long as they can clean that up and then keep teams off from scoring, I'm fine with allowing chunk plays in the run game, but that's the only way I'm fine with allowing chunk plays in the run game. So, this needs to be cleaned up unless you're going to be the best red zone defense in football. But real quick, before we leave today, I do want to talk about this Colts pass coverage. Wasn't perfect. Some miscommunications. Jalen Jones obviously had his hands full with Mike Evans, but I think this was a really good, really strong game from the Colts secondary. Yes, again, there's some plays that you want to take back, but for the most part, they limited the big passing chunks. They held Mike Evans outside of those 2 touchdowns in check for most of the game. Chris Godwin didn't have a really strong game either. Baker Mayfield made a couple of really nice throws, but for the most part, he struggled. And it goes back again to Gus Bradley changing to more of a quarters, too high type of scheme these last couple of weeks. I was really interested to see if he would keep this type of change against a better offense outside the bye week. And he has. He's really protecting the deep ball. He's letting teams get everything underneath and then having his players fly up and do what they can and letting the pass rush to go to work on those underneath type throws. So I've been really impressed with this change from the Colts defense. Again, I still want to see how it, if they kind of keep this when Juju Brents comes back. But for the most part, the Colts are not a cover 3 defense anymore. Like these last 3 weeks, they have not been a cover 3 defense. They have been a quarters, like Fangio, Saban type of defense, where they're throwing a lot of mixes and matches to really stop the deep ball, which I've been really impressed with.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people. Jake Cadiente is now in here. I know he wants to talk about it. Nick Cross. I mean, I think at this point we want to see what it looks like just as much as you guys do, because I just feel like there's still some fundamental things that keep going wrong that probably shouldn't be at this point in the season, especially from someone who is a veteran. And again, I'm not a coach, so I don't know what percentage of this stuff is falling on Thomas. And I don't like piling it all on him, but it's a hot topic right now. Yeah. I mean, when you look at people's concerns on the defensive side of the ball, that's one of the first things that comes up. It's just maybe Nick Cross being in there. I'm not even saying they have to make some wholesale change and like put him in there as the starter right now. But like, I'd like to see what it looks like for more than just a couple plays a game. Like let's see what it looks like for a whole quarter or a whole half straight. Like, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's not some big fix, but I feel like we at least need to see.
Yep. And that's something we'll definitely talk about this week as we really analyze this entire game. But guys, if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zack Hicks 2, all on X. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll see you guys back here bright and early on Tuesday morning.